out with some friends, doing a little bit of some street evangelism, which was an amazing thing last night to do. And I hope that can lead maybe to where I am today, because that was yesterday. Today's a new day. But so I took some notes just to kind of organize my thoughts, maybe to put key points on the board. It was really nice. Jacqueline, thanks for your presentation. It was really nice to have that visual. And if it's okay, maybe we can remember Ephesians 1:3.
I can get the here.
Eraser. So I'll put some dates to match my kind of life events. I'm talking about my story. Hey, my name's Clark, and talking about the ups and downs and hinge moments as from our kind of hearing Joey, our cultivator testimony, our cultivator story, the hinge moments. And those were kind of like our hard times, and then our high points, kind of like ups and downs, hard and soft, and then just ultimately it's kind of I do want to make a point or express it's a testimony. So this is my testimony to Jesus, because this is why I'm here. Or what I want to come to is to come to Jesus. And so I'm going to start. So I was born in 1991. We'll start on this side of the timeline. I like the single line. I think that's helpful. There's an arrow for the future. Past goes that direction too, so there's another arrow. So yeah, here's 1991, and I was born on Valentine's Day, February 14th. And that's been a fun thing in my life, having a birthday and a holiday. I just recently looked up what Saint Valentine, who that was, and there was multiple Saint Valentines. Ultimately, he was a martyr, and he was killed for sharing the gospel to the Romans in the Roman times. So that's the namesake of Valentine's Day, my birthday. I grew up in the church. One of the greatest things I celebrate and that I find great value in is that I had the blessing of being born into a home of Christian parents. Both my parents are Christians. They grew up in Christian homes. My grandparents are Christians, and culturally I come from people who believe in Jesus Christ and they profess Jesus, and that has always been a point of recognition and identity for me, and I value that, and I love to share that. That makes me who I am, very much so, as to the point of being, this is a testimony, this is my testimony. And so I was dedicated into a church called First Baptist Church of Franklin. So that's First Baptist Church, Franklin. And that's here in Franklin, Tennessee. That church is now called Church of the City. If you guys have heard of Church of the City, they have a great campus. It's the same building. They just painted it went from brick to white. So they just painted all the brick white, and it's really cool. They got a cool little logo that you can see on the wall there. Church of the City. It's gone through a couple of name changes, but that was the church I was dedicated in. And as an infant, beyond my memory, I was put on that stage and was brought into a congregation, a big group of people, and said, "Hey, this is a new life," and I was received into that community. And I'm really thankful for that. I think that really defined my life. That would be a very significant moment for the shaping of my life later. Going from being raised, growing up, going to church with my family regularly, that was really, as I said, a significant moment, foundational to my life. My mom is a musician. That's defined my life. I'm a musician. I very much identify with music. I have played music since I was like 5 years old. And that started me playing the piano. So kind of thinking of a way to structure this, and maybe I can go in kind of like year increments. So I'm 30 now, so it's just time happening. So here we are in 2021, the present. So from 91 until about 96, I was soon to start, or had just started elementary school. I'm in kindergarten, going to a cool school called Trinity Elementary, and I'm starting to take music lessons from my mom. I'm playing piano, and that is an exciting time for me because I'm starting to be able to shape and understand how to even kind of like, think about that identity of identifying with nature and reality around you. I mean, those are big words for a 5-year-old, but I think even just like senses, just like, I remember there being such a cool class. I was probably in kindergarten and there being a moment, kindergarten to 1st grade, and it's like, these are your 5 senses. And I was like, I can count those on my hand. And then I, just like thinking that idea of like, this is all within my world. This is this identity. I'm identifying to it. And so music was really important for me until that point. Because one, my mom played in our church orchestra, and she went from playing the flute, growing up in a musical family. Her father, my grandpa, his name's Ron. God bless him. He's doing great. He's a great, strong individual. He's in his 80s now. And God bless him. Hope he lives even another 80. So he is like a music minister for his church in a town called Hopkinsville, Kentucky. That's just kind of like right north. It's like kind of on the border of Tennessee to Kentucky. And so he was a music minister. My mom grew very much. All of her siblings, her 3 brothers, they all played music, and they loved it. That's what they did. And so my mom really tried to get me and my 3 siblings to really engage with that as well. To coming into, I grew up, as I said, I grew up in a Christian home, going to church. My mom played music in the church, so that was a legacy. She wanted to pass that on to the kids. And so, also as a side note, there, I'm one of 4 kids, and I am the youngest. All right, piano lessons here, in case anyone's feeling inspired to go take some piano lessons themselves. So I grew up in the church. Literally my first memories of life itself is being in the big sanctuary. At the time, there's a new sanctuary that's been built in that church, but it was a very tall sanctuary, and my mom was learning how to play harp. So she's playing harp, and my sister and I are the 2 youngers. Her name's Emily, and we would just crawl and just were kids learning life itself in church, listening to my mom practice harp. I think this is kind of a moment of like reflection and recollection, a lot of memories, coming to the present. But those are some of my first memories, is my mom playing the harp. And so within a few years after that, I got to see my siblings all taking piano lessons from my mom, where she also played piano, and that was a significant point of learning to play music, identifying with music, being in church where my mom was on stage regularly playing music, and I similarly wanted to do that too. So later in life, I did end up taking lessons separate of my mom. I learned how to play. I play the bass, I play the guitar, I love to play the drums, and I'll sit in front of a keyboard, but I don't really know what I'm doing too much. But music's just always been so instrumental into my life, and that's always been so connected to church. So going forward a couple of years, music being a constant for me in my younger years through elementary. I also played sports. That was really cool for me. I played soccer, I played t-ball. I wrestled in a high school after hours camp, and that led me to wrestle later in life as well. I did that all the way through high school. That idea of recreation and extracurricular ideas, that was really supportive of my idea of just like freedom, and it comes to a point of like, this is structure, and I do these things with my time, and I got to share that with my siblings and friends. It became a point of community. Those things were very helpful to me growing up in my youth. So thankful for my parents for helping me get connected into sports leagues. But soon around this time of in the late 90s, I gave my life to Christ when I was 7 years old. I have specific memories of crying and having temper tantrums in the pews when my parents first had brought me out of kind of the Sunday school to actually sit with my family, and I wasn't allowed to eat the sacrament, the cracker and the juice, and I was like, that's not fair. I'm in here. You brought me in here. If I can't eat the crackers and juice, then that's a big deal. And all the while it wasn't, but I thought it was, and so I would cry and I would get upset. And it took a little while for me to learn that, hey, this is a point of acting a way so that the group and the community can have peace and can get along, because crying babies when they're not babies is not a pleasant thing. And so I was probably 5 or 6, just trying to have my way, and it wasn't my way. And all the while, there was a greater lesson there to learn. And eventually, I got old enough to be where my parents would let me sit with the family. I didn't have to go to like the nursery or something, and I got to actually participate in the communion, the blood and the blood and the bread, blood and the flesh. And it was around this time of maturity that I think that there was a point of coincidence, that these things kind of came together, where I saw this idea of like maturity of myself being present with other community members, other people around me, not just my family, but that I could see myself in my family, I could see myself in my neighbors. And I think that really was foundational to me identifying with who Christ was in myself. And this was around that time of like, wow, my parents are letting me eat the sacrament, or they're passing the plate around. I get to participate in that. That idea really led me to Christ, where I was able to have some specific conversations with my parents outside of church as well as inside of the church. And I actually, there was a specific evening one time where I had a conversation with my mom and my dad, and I was able to ask Jesus to come into my life with them. And that was a point of invitation. That was a point of offering, where I felt I had even been offered up to say, hey, I want to accept Christ into my life. So that happened when I was 7 years old. So this is around, I guess that's around 98. And it was in that same year that I also was baptized. So it was, I was baptized by my grandpa at the YMCA in Franklin off of, I think that's Mac Hatcher. And I was baptized in that YMCA at the great age of 7 years old. So coming from out of that point, I had a ready commitment to Christ. I had a knowledge of Christ, but I really didn't understand that idea of commitment, and to the point of life and living, and especially to the point where, as I've gotten older, there's such key concepts like discipleship and mentorship, and even in just ideas of community, where I showed up, I participated, but there was a real lacking in my life, or maybe to say like an invisible ceiling, or like a glass ceiling would be a good idea or just a window. Where I knew I could come to that window, I could see through it, but I didn't really understand how to utilize it or really make point to it. It was just a point of, it was just like, well, I see it, I know it, am I living it? The questions continued to raise, and I wasn't seeking them. There's a great Bible verse for us there of bring every thought captive into Christ. Continue to grow up. That was a point. That was a very strong inflection point in my life, maybe a hinge moment where I did accept Christ into my life, and I knew Jesus, and I believed in Jesus, but I wasn't really living it out in a manner. There was definitely moments of strength, moments of light that I would share and exhibit into that, of showing up to church, reading my Bible. But it was much later in life, and to which I actually had a point of saying that this is actually my life in Christ, that I could state or identify as I can now. And thankfully, this is the present moment to be able to share in that and be like, I believe in Jesus. So I went to an elementary school called Trinity Elementary. I went through school in kind of the normal schedule. I went to kindergarten at 5 years old, and then I graduated from high school when I was 18. And that full continuous, that kind of continuous time of school, public school in Williamson County here in Tennessee. And on that same topic though, before I get off of that, I definitely recommitted my life at least once. It was about the age of when I was about 10 years old. So we'll go ahead and put another 5 years up here. And so we're going up to from 91 to 95, and we'll go up to 2000 here. And Y2K happened that year, so that was kind of a world event. It was a big hoax, I think. That's what we describe Y2K. So it was around this time that I recommitted my life to Christ, and that there's specific moments where that was a strong emphasis in my life, where I said, you know what, I actually want to redeclare that. I want that to be a point of emphasis. Going through middle school, growing up, middle school was a fun time for me. I felt like I had a real desire to succeed and do well in school, and it was kind of like it wasn't quite what I would call a game, but but it was definitely what I would say as a point of challenge. It's like, this is a thing to do, it's a course, it's a race, I can finish it. I know there's a timeline on it, I'm gonna be done with it, and I'm gonna keep going with whatever it is that I got from it. But if I do well here, then I believe that will help me do well later too. So I think there is definitely a component, there's like a mental component to education that I got out of that, where it's like, get through it and let it build you up. Don't let it kill you, don't let it break you down. There was something that I liked and I thrived in that. And I really enjoyed that about school, and I thought that was something I could share with my classmates too, where I had some great friends. And on that note, I had a thing I wrote down, not here in my notes, but a thing to share was, I grew up with Joey Langford's youngest brother. His name's Taylor, and we were peers and like rivals. Like if you guys ever played the game Pokemon, you had a rival in that game. You had you were just kind of stocked next to another like non-playable character, and you constantly had to battle them. Taylor was like that for me, except we got along really well, and we never fought, and it was only ever like sharpening iron. And that was really enjoyable for me, to have a good friend like that. And Taylor True, and that's what's so cool about being here at Cul2vate, is where Joey is kind of our leader here. Seeing that still is like a family connection. And we went to church together, we went to elementary school together, and just having a ready friend available, a guy who I got to grow up with, was really exciting. And later on we ended up playing music together too in high school. And there's more to Taylor too. I'll share that as I get up to my college years here, which starts in around 2009, in about another decade. We'll fast forward. Went through middle school. So in about 05, let's see if I can do this right. We got 05. I'm in middle school about this time, and things that I'm doing in my day to day are I'm doing theater in middle school. I am running cross country, and I'm wrestling in our sports teams. Outside of school, I'm going to church and hanging out with some close friends, making new friends, and doing kind of childhood, young adulthood kind of things. So that was those are good years. As I said, I really enjoyed school. Those were fun times for me. So going back up here, going now to 2010. Or actually, I guess in 2005, I'm going into high school, and so up here to go to 10. Yeah, 10 years in here. What do you think, guys? Yeah. So going to high school, I went to a high school called Page High. I continued a lot of these same extracurricular activities, just kind of life as normal, and I was just living and seeking kind of to eat the fruit and suck the marrow. I believe that there's a lot of ideas that get sown into our minds one time in life, where when we can reflect, and specifically even to share from our room and where we're at. Even like talking about like seeds of redemption, which is a good word that was kind of shared from Adam, I think last week. I heard talking about how we can find redemption even in the past, and these kinds of moments I think even help reveal some of the better finer points, which one way they seem a certain way, and to be able to reflect and think back on them, they help us come into a newness or a fresh walk. And I love how I find that in Christ. So high school was a good time. I did all kinds of stuff. The extracurriculars continued, and it was my 8th grade year, which was, I believe, in I guess 03 to 04, somewhere around that year. I'm 13 years old, and I'll just put a mark on here. I'll just put music. It was just a good time where I started to play. I was going to church regularly. I was going to. It was around. So before I get to the music, but definitely that's a highlight here. I want to try and stay organized. My whole family moved from First Baptist of Franklin to a church called Brentwood Baptist Church, which is kind of our connection here. Which is a strong connection here, especially with the ladies and those who come on Mondays here to Cul2vate, both Brentwood Baptist Church. And so my family went to Brentwood Baptist Church. That was a change that happened around 2001. I started my middle school. I started in the middle school ministry there with some individuals who are still strongly linked and are actually now head pastors at other churches of Brentwood Baptist. Guys like Aaron Bryan, Jay Strother were individuals in my life, and these were guys who were my Sunday school teachers in middle school. I, from 6th grade going into 8th grade, in that time of school, middle school, I began to play music. I began to play music again, where I had stopped taking piano lessons after my mom told me I didn't have to do that. And I started taking music lessons again. I really had an appetite for music and wanting to learn. And I started to do that as I was 13 years old, and I picked up the bass guitar and started taking music lessons from our bassist at church there. And so I'm taking bass lessons. My sister bought an acoustic. My sister closer to me in age, the same sister who we were crawling together at First Baptist of Franklin. She had an acoustic guitar she didn't want to play. She picked it up, and it was kind of there's definitely more to the story there, but she just had it and didn't play it, and so I took it from her very gladly. I was like, hey, Emily, if you're not gonna play that, I'll play that. And so I learned how to play the acoustic guitar without taking any formal lessons, but that became a really strong, steady line where I could kind of play these musical instruments, and that was exciting to be able to just learn music in both a studied, kind of more serious way, as well as like an informal way of just like having a guitar in the living room or in my room where I could just play that and learn covers of like Nirvana or Blink-182, some fun bands and stuff, just different music. So connecting music into my walk with Christ was pretty significant, where I was able to play in our church orchestra there at Brentwood Baptist Church. And there's foundational leaders into that, where our orchestra director, his name's Michael Lawrence, an incredible individual, had a great impact on my life. And he led both our church youth orchestra, which is where I actually had a direct outlet to play. I could play this big upright bass, it's like a giant violin. And so I'm playing that in our youth orchestra. And eventually that led to me playing in the adult orchestra. And this all happens from the time I'm kind of going into high school here, around the 2010 time. As 2010 is when I'm graduating high school, so I guess around 05, as I'm getting into high school, I'm playing in our church orchestra, and that's a consistent, readily available thing that I'm able to do, where my mom had a great connection playing in the orchestra, as I had said, and then we had our bass teacher there, or a bass player, and he's giving me lessons. So our church bassist was giving me lessons on the bass, and that was a really exciting thing. And we're playing all the hymns and all the fun Christian songs. I got to play in a really great concert with Michael W. Smith, where he comes to Brentwood Baptist sometimes, and he would do his Christmas concert. So I got to play in Michael W. Smith's orchestra, I think for 2 different Christmases over the course of my high school years. So go through high school. I'm doing things like student council. I'm doing things like wrestling. I played football 1 year. My sophomore year of high school, I had a really bad, this is probably around 2008 or so, going into my sophomore year, coming out of football season, and I start working out in the gym. This is kind of the first time I'm ever like going to the gym, and I am just doing some weights, lifting some weights, and I kind of sprained some muscles in my back that I don't really think about. Doesn't really seem to be anything. I just have the idea that you get sore and you heal up, and so I'm going from football season to wrestling season, and I had a really bad fracture in one of my vertebrae, in my lumbars, and was just on the mat wrestling. Football season's totally done, and we're working out in a different kind of regiment and in a different kind of way. And my buddy Kevin and I are on the mat, and we're wrestling, and the whistle blows, and I'm down. I'm in a down position. It's kind of like being on all fours, and the other guy's on top of you, and they're trying to pin you. And me being on the bottom in that situation, I'm trying to get out and get free so that I can pin him. And we're just the struggle of 2 people putting energy on each other, and I hear a pop. And I fractured my vertebrae, but I wrestled on it for about 2 more weeks before I was like, oh, the pain's too bad at this point. Maybe I should talk to my mom to take me to the doctor. So being young though, that's what happens, right? Like I'm like, I can just bear it. And I think that was kind of a calling too, to like be sensitive, be sensitive to the pain or the feelings. And whether it's just your feelings in this way or feelings in this way, that ultimately all that to say that I fractured my vertebrae, and that led to me not wrestling my senior year, my last year of high school, and a lot of points of like recovery, and just also just kind of interesting to go through the whole doctor's office experience. Like, hey, these guys are gonna put some radiation so they can see my back. Like, it's just cool little things, you know, like X-rays for the first time in your life. And that's just always been kind of a cool, interesting point for me to just think about how doctors are out there living in the world. Side note, but so I wrestled and did that, enjoyed that. I had a point of injury when I'm in high school. Music is a mainstay here for me. And it's about the time of my senior year. I'm getting involved with the theater program in high school, and I am playing in the church, or I'm playing in the high school orchestra for the musicals. I'm playing in our jazz band, so music's such a cool constant thing. And I start playing in a rock band called The Pursuits, and put that right under here with the music. And you guys can totally check out The Pursuits online. Our music's still out there, and I love it. I still listen to this stuff, and the guys that live around town, and we're still pals, and we link up and connect. There's Joseph, Paul, Grant, Leland, Ryan, myself, and there's a guy named David in the band. It's rotating, and we stayed as a band for about 7 years, from I guess like 2007-8 through 2000. It was about 5 years. It was about 2012 or so. So from 2007 to about 2012 that we eventually kind of disbanded, but the music's still out there. And that was really significant to me going into college, where these guys grew up in the Brentwood area. I met them at a church called Fellowship Bible Church, where Jacqueline introduced me to some Frisbee. You can go play Frisbee on Saturdays over at Fellowship Bible Church on the lawn. And so those guys went to Fellowship Bible Church. I went to Brentwood Baptist Church, and our churches had a church camp one year together. And I got to meet the girlfriend of the lead guitarist, and she going to Fellowship Bible Church with these other guys, who I guess didn't go to camp that year, but they just kind of heard about me playing music, and I got to hear about how they had played music through my friend. Her name is Margaret, and I got to meet them. I got to meet Paul, and I got to experience that idea of what the kind of music they made, and I got to be a part of that and kind of join into the band. And that totally shaped the rest of my life, being in a rock band where we actually wanted to take it serious, because I had played with guys previous and it wasn't as very serious. It's just an idea of kind of guys just doing their thing, or people just doing their thing. And so seeing music in different capacities, where I had the orchestra at church. I was a part of a youth orchestra in high school as just like an outside of school thing. It's called Williamson County Youth Orchestra. Very thankful to an individual named Mark Johnson who leads that group, and that was a really cool thing where the kids outside of school from their bands and stuff got to be able to play. Their school bands got to play in an orchestra in like a classical kind of setting. And so while I'm playing in this rock band, I'm still taking music lessons, and that's still an active pursuit of mine. No pun, but hey, the pursuits. And I start taking music lessons from an individual. His name's Cul2vate, but he is the head of bass at Belmont University. And I'm thinking about different colleges where I want to go, and Belmont becomes a pretty regular thing at this point in time as I'm about to graduate my senior year. I'm sending out applications. I'm doing all this standardized testing, and I kind of really consider Belmont. And thankfully scholarships were available to me, and that was kind of the point where I was able to say, hey, I want to commit to this. They covered I got half of my tuition covered at Belmont, and I'm really thankful to have been able to go there. So all the while, I'm going to Brentwood Baptist, participating in our youth groups there, and it was about in 2007 here, kind of separate of the music, as kind of leading up to college. But I had a really big moment in the summer of 2007, being with Brentwood Baptist Church, and I was able to attend and participate in a mission trip. So the whole youth group had an opportunity to go, kind of separate of where church had the like summer camps. You know, you go for a week out to the lake or out into some cabins out in the woods or something, and you have great community and fellowship and leadership, and kids come to Christ and kids come to know who Jesus is from the church groups and church activities of focusing on getting the students who are community members of the church to see what life is like outside of the church, but somehow this is still church, and it grows the identity of what Christ community is. Where you don't need the four walls. But so there we are in the wilderness, and this is also the place where I meet Margaret, and she introduced me to the band, and there's so much that's happening in this idea of youthfulness. So many things are going on. But we have a separate opportunity to go do something as a church, as the body, as a church body, and I get to go to Chicago with the Brentwood Baptist youth group, where there's probably close to 200 kids, 100 to 100 minimum kids that are going to Chicago on big gray line buses, right? And it's a cost to us. So that's also, I think, something to take into consideration. It costs money to be able to kind of do these trips, or at least that there is a sense of resource that's being tapped into to participate. And so we go to serve in Chicago for about a week, and that was a crazy time for me. I find pictures on Facebook where this is kind of also a time that's shaping into my idea of seeing the connection and the connectivity of what electricity and the internet is doing, where I was probably 5 years old the first time I got I wasn't 5 years old, but I was a kid in elementary school, and I'm getting on a chat room and on AOL, and I have an internet access, dial-up and America Online, So just considering this connectivity, that was kind of something I don't want to omit. I don't want to forget that, because it's definitely been a constant growing up, if maybe into say generation. I'm sure I believe everyone has a great unique understanding and experience into that of what increasing levels of connection are, and how that addresses our humanity and who we are as people. And so that idea of internet connection was really kind of significant, and I think about that where I can look back on pictures from that time serving in Chicago, and those pictures are still preserved, online. And so serving in Chicago with Brentwood Baptist Church was very significant to me, and really opened up my eyes to what missions is at all as a concept. It's very much an introduction, and a very scratching the surface maybe of just what that even looks like, of people going away from home and away from that idea of being raised somewhere to go do something for the purpose of sharing the gospel of Jesus. And that interacts and I'm thankful for Jacqueline's insight there about Asia and living into another part of the world. Where so just a brief glimpse there of what Chicago was like for me, living there, where I actually ended up living in Chicago several years later. So yeah, I'm involved with Brentwood Baptist Church. I actually got a small scholarship from Brentwood Baptist Church to go to Belmont, so I'm graduating from high school, going to college. My best friend Taylor Langford, Joey's youngest brother, he is my roommate, and he and I roomed together for 2 years there, and I'm playing in a rock band, and I am studying music business there. I additionally went to college to study bass and be a musician performance major, and I decided the business route, going into the business school, was a better venture, was a better idea for me. So that's what I decided to do. I think about that a lot because I definitely still play a lot of music, and I definitely play my instrument a whole lot. But here I am working at Cul2vate, not in the music business field in any specific sense, but I'm really thankful for the skills and the education in which I did gain from university and college. I definitely would encourage that idea of pursuing university. So I'm playing in a band, and I graduate from college here in about 2013. And so here we go. Here's about 5 years. Short list. I graduate from college in 2013. I graduated from high school in 2009. Graduating from school, I graduated from Belmont in 2013. And I have played in several bands. I have started to work into the music field, and I am seeking the idea of music as a career. I'm working, supporting myself. I'm living in Nashville, Belmont University being in Nashville. gives me a strong sense of identity as to place and purpose and life and walk of life. And ultimately, there's a lot that I am perhaps not stating about how my walk of faith is crucial here. I'm really thankful for the space where I can kind of stand in this place as a Christian organization that provides me that ability just to be who I am and not have to explain myself. But to get to the point of where I actually want to explain and get to that, because as I said earlier, I was not actively living in a Christian walk, and just to get that to a point of where I would even say profession, where I profess my faith. I actively am seeking to share my faith, and that's the thing that I encourage and I want to do specifically as I'm trying to talk about my testimony. And so the absence of my faith, or maybe my hindsight and seeing how I'm missing the mark, of where there's still sin and there's still things going on in my life. This is really present for me in my college years, where the point of graduation was kind of a ramp, or kind of an acceleration into I'm living on my own. I am out of college. I'm living with old roommates and good friends from college, kind of just working, supporting myself. I'm within kind of systems of like society and career, and specifically I'm a bike delivery driver, and it's I think there's another bar right there. That looks good. Here's my bike, and I'm a bike delivery driver, and that's what I do for money and income in this time. And it's in this time when I start to really consider, and that came out of there's a need where I had to start riding my bike. I got in trouble with the law a couple of times when I was in college. That was pretty foundational or significant to my life. I was arrested. I think 4 unique times over from the years of 2010 to 2016. I was arrested once in 2010, just as a citation. I was arrested and actually taken to jail 3 other times after that, where those times were in 2011, I went streaking, I got in trouble. 2010 was an incident where I was caught with weed, paraphernalia, marijuana, for our nice English-Spanish word there, marijuana. And then 2011, was arrested for streaking in Williamson County. And 2012, I was arrested for driving while under the influence. I'm really thankful for ultimately how the outcomes came about that, where I can talk about it in this space and I can share that in a point of strength and confidence. And even just to say, it's okay to have failures and mistakes, because those are points that we can work from. It's easy to be upset or be down about things that don't seem favorable or satisfactory, but those are also the same things of substance to which we can work with. So I do think that that's a point where it's good to at least acknowledge and say, hey, this is what happened. Because even if we don't feel good about it, at least we can still come to the point of, I can work with that. So that's also a point where I want to get to the idea. I'm not really living, a lot of my actions aren't really representative of a walk with Christ. But in my heart, I'm kind of coming to a point where that's really evident. I'm not seeking Christ. I'm seeking myself in a lot of things. I was living very selfishly in this time. I did things, I experimented with illegal substances, as I said, alcohol and marijuana. My friendships suffered because of a lack of actual commitment and valuable relationships I found to be on very thin lines and thin sheets of ice that really just were by name or like to say nominal. They were nominal relationships with friends, and my social circle really suffered, and I experienced a lot of mental unwellness. And I believe that was a symptom of a spiritual unwellness, where I was sick in my spirit. And that was most evident in the fact that I was getting literally arrested. I literally went to jail, was going to holding cells in jail. And this is more or less a first time for me to be able to share that, and to a point of saying, hey, you know what, there was darkness and there's still light in it. And I fully came out of that. There was a specific time where I recommitted my life in January 2015. In the year of 2015, January, I recommitted my life to Christ. Not to jump to that point, but to just make it known that there was a point in time which things started to change. And coming to that point in time was very significant for me, because I was really struggling, experiencing difficulty in years, and I knew something was amiss. I was experiencing what I thought was just like, oh, it's just fun to be on a roller coaster. But a roller coaster is sometimes not the most useful metaphor for life, because we get off and on. In life, you don't have a choice of getting off and on. We're now talking about also death. So in that severity of where I could see death and I was still alive, and I didn't fully grasp that concept of life within my death, I was really able to put things like grace and mercy into perspective, and I understood those by the name of Jesus, and that's what spoke most profoundly to me. And there's specific examples of leading me into that idea of what are the bigger things of life, what are the things worth living for, what are those questions that we can't get rid of and they just keep coming to us, what can I do with those questions? And so I continued to experiment. Hello, spider friend. He didn't die. So he's still not dead. So I was the shift over here to the side of the board now. I was experimenting with drugs. I had frail and fragile friend groups and social circles. I didn't really know what I wanted to do after I graduated college. The idea of career was really daunting. It was uncertain to me. But I had a great education, and I had a college degree. I graduated from college in 2013, as I said. But I knew that there was something really absent in my life. And so at that point in time, when that really began to take hold of my absence into myself, and I really understood that as the difference of light to dark, and how that kind of materializes, or how that takes physical shape into the world of light and dark. It was more than just space, and then there being stars that emit light. I knew it was more than just physical things of the physical realm. I knew there was more to it. And growing up in a Christian home, that's where that resonated. That's where there was actually God in my life. I had grown up from a place, I committed my life to Christ. There was a relationship with Christ present, but almost like the wind, you know? I knew I could set a sail if I wanted to. I could catch wind if I wanted, but I didn't really know what to do with it. And I just kind of liked the idea of saying that there's more to the story, there's more here, but I'm just gonna keep living. And I probably would not have even said that at the time. It wasn't a matter of I'll just keep living. It was more of like, well, there's rocks and I might be hurting my feet or my head at one point or another. And I was getting physically hurt. I was experiencing some downtroddenness, actually experiencing unwellness and obstacle. As I talked about, as I said, I got arrested a couple of times, experienced things, because that has nothing to do with the right and the wrong. It has nothing to do with what's fair. It has everything to do with the fact that these are real circumstances and real people that we have to interact with, whether we like it or not. I'm up here talking. I appreciate you guys listening to me, and I don't want to push the time too much. So I ultimately, after one specific event that happened to me as I was talking, my social circles, I was having a tough time interacting and getting along with people, but these were people I loved, and these were people who loved me. And that was expressed, and we knew that about each other. But I still couldn't really grasp how and why we liked each other, or why we would get along. These are my friends in college, people I could still call today if they might pick up, and we would have great conversations at length about great, beautiful things. And I would be able to introduce God into the conversation now. Thank you, God. So it was through some of these circumstantial things that ultimately I saw that conflict desired resolution, and I wanted to find resolution for my conflict. And I started to, look into texts and look into books, and I saw my education as an outlet and a resource. I saw that there was light and knowledge, very similarly to a description of a fallen angel or a demon that's in the dark. These are spiritual things that I was dealing with and wrestling with. And I'm really thankful that God was there to help me, give me rest and bring me through it all. I saw philosophy as a great method or tool. I saw spiritualism and other world religions as interesting and worthwhile and useful. And I saw altering my mind with substances to be a way that I could release and I could get away from other stresses and anxieties. I started to go to therapy around this time. This was right before I graduated. This is about my senior year of college, 2012 and 13. And a Christian lady, where I knew that she somehow was different because she expressed and was open to share the fact that she knew Jesus as an identifier to herself, where I had started to shy away from that. And I said, you know what, God, I can't do this whole, like I am yours thing. I can't do this whole, I am known because of Jesus. That was what was really tough for me. And there have been years of that where cracks had really started to become whole pitfalls and whole caverns in my life. As a metaphor, as a way to understand that, specific individuals started to be able to help shine light into my life, or just to be examples of Christ into my life, where I was able to then start to walk and navigate back to Christ. But it was all because I was willing, and it was all because I had resource and I had availability to those means of seeking Christ again, where Christ didn't go anywhere. And that was what I learned the whole time. I had a seed of Christ, had a seed of the Word of God sowed in my life at a very young age. And thankfully that as the same metaphor of what Christ represented to the Hebrew people, and to the world itself, to our whole idea of the world and reality at that point, flourished and it branched and it produced new fruit and it started to come alive. And so there's a specific book I'd like to share as I kind of try to get back up here to present day. It's called My Utmost for His Highest, and it's a 365-day devotional. And my parents gave me that as I think like an Easter gift to celebrate Resurrection Sunday. Excuse me. In 2007, and I started to read that book for the first time in like 2012 or 13, just pages, and it kind of brought me back to the Bible. And my love of philosophy and knowledge and education really helped invigorate me to want to explore how to do that outside of school, especially as I was about to graduate. And so at that point in time when I'm graduating from college, I'm starting to join a Buddhist meditation group. I had the great privilege of going to Japan as a study abroad trip when I was in college. That was in the summer of 2011. And I went to Japan for about a month, for 29 days, and I got to visit Buddhist temples and see these monks and how austere and devout and pious that they were. You know, these great ideals. These guys were living a whole lifestyle of like worthiness and excellence, and they do it from many times from birth to death. They live in this cycle, and it was a very exciting, really cool, eye-opening thing where I that kind of became a point of like, there's an ideal, there's a way of life that I can live as I'm becoming an adult and finding identity into maturity of a physical nature. I'm becoming an adult, and I could see that as what that might be something that I would aspire to. And that idea of growth itself became the idea that I wanted to mimic that back into the physical. And so the flesh was still being very present into my life, and I wanted to keep it that way. And so I joined this Buddhist group, and we would meditate on Sundays, or Saturdays, we'd get together, and they would do that 1 or 2 other times a week. And it was always like, man, is that a door? Is that not a door? How do I get there? I know the times that I can show up. How can I get there? How can I go do that with these people? Because it's so peaceful and fun. And I got to just meditate. And I did that, and that was really exciting for me. And it led me to really explore not just the expression, not just the physical actions of sitting still by myself with a group of other people, but it led me to want to read and know that there were words even when I wasn't sitting and being still and silent. And so this idea of silence really got kind of juxtaposed to the idea of there being words that we're speaking, and those words speak very loudly when they're written down and they have historical value. I kind of experienced this idea of spirituality in a new and fresh way. I was coming out of some mental anguish and mental depression, and I found myself still seeking and wanting a lot in my life in areas such as career, areas such as money, areas such as my education. Here's a scroll to represent my college degree. I hope that comes through. It's my artistic attempt here, guys. Cool. So Ultimately, as this is a specific point to my testimony, because as I thought that I was a Buddhist, and I thought that I was like really spiritual and had peace in my life, I started to want to know why, and that idea of the knowledge was very significant to me. It was very important to know that there were words to the reason and the history of this story and this message. So as I start to find and read into the Buddhist scriptures and texts, ultimately, long story short, I came back to the Bible, and I found that this is one book that's cohesive and present, and it stands alone, separate of any other world religion, as a world religion itself. And it hasn't changed. And that book is still there. And there's a beautiful story to how that book got composed, and it is now present here for us. And so prior to me ultimately coming back to the Bible and recommitting my life to Christ in 2015, I really wanted to know about these Buddhist scriptures, and I found a lot of division, and I found a lot of divisiveness, and found a lot of things that didn't really make sense, but if you just glossed it over and put it in a big composition or put it together, then it was cool and it worked. And people were still living their lives, and they still had an idol or an ideal, if you will, of Buddha. And it works that way. And people can just make it function and work, and that the texts are still there, and there's a lot of history, and there's a beautiful legacy to these people all across the world. But that says nothing to what I was still seeking. And I was still seeking, and it wasn't feeding me, and it wasn't fueling me, and it wasn't filling me up. So ultimately, my lack of satisfaction, which says nothing to the world religion, says nothing to those people. God bless, you know. I like to honor the people in the moments that we can. We're people, and I believe we're all children of God. But I ultimately ended up coming back to the Bible because of a couple of little nuggets and seeds that were still present for me, such as my book, My Utmost for His Highest, where I saw a great individual who wrote that book. It's 365-day devotional. And I started to read that book day by day in 2015. For 2 years, from 2015 to 16, I read that book every day. And then in 2017, I found another 365-day devotional that was really helpful for me. In 2018, I kind of did the same thing. And it was about this time that I kind of lost my discipline to the daily devotional, but I still do that today. I still seek that today, where I don't have to have a daily devotional, but it is a daily time. And that's a point of encouragement, I would say, for anyone to find a little bit of time, a little window in the day, every day, to do something specific. And the Bible still fills that for me, and that's ultimately where that comes from. Like a book like My Utmost for His Highest, which is a great inspiration into a Christian walk of faith, of the theologian and pastor Oswald Chambers. And that book spoke so deeply to me, where I wanted to get away from just the base level spiritualism and spirituality, and I wanted to know why religion and spirituality would ever have been at a point of conflict as to divide the spirit from religion at all. And I really started to go back to the Bible, and I really wanted to know what the Bible was really speaking to my life, where I had been absent for several years of not being in the Bible. And so the Bible really started speaking to my life in a new way, as I believe it still does. 2015, I recommitted my life to Christ one morning in January, where I was reading from My Utmost for His Highest, and I sat down, I had the Bible app. It was a very specific moment for me, because I was back here in this digital space, seeing the Bible in a digital space, and I also had this physical word on paper, and I was able to sit with the Bible in my hand on my phone, but then I had the paper and my pen in the other hand, and I said, there's something bigger here, and almost just like a signal in my mind, like a live wire being triggered. I came back to the point of saying, you know what? This is a matter of decision. This is a matter of commitment. And so I recommitted my life to Christ. And I made that as a verbal agreement, where I actually had to bring the word to myself. I had to say it. And whatever that might mean in that moment is for anyone who could receive it. But I had to say that, you know what, Christ, I want you in my life. And so I identified with Christ stronger than ever in that moment. I recommitted my life to Christ. And I started to live differently going forward that day. I started to live back into a way which I had actually never lived previous. And in the same way, when I was about 10 years old here in 2000, I recommitted my life to Christ, and that became a point of recognition. I think I was a little bit like Nicodemus in that moment, where I got to come to Christ and say, hey, what is this, Jesus? What is this thing about God that you are, and that you know? And I got to find that in a sense of self-identification in a way that I never found before, and I believe that is a point of being reborn. And so that shaped my life for the next couple of years. And in 2016, I moved to Chicago. And then I lived there for 2 years, and I found a home church for the first time in my life. I started going to a church called People Church, and they're a cool international community. It's a small church there in Chicago, but they've grown a couple of bodies to expand into other cities around the world globally, Barcelona, Toronto, and they're in Chicago. And that's coming from a family there, a mother and a father, but a husband and a wife, and they lead that church there in Chicago. It's called People Church. And then I'm presently engaged there at People Church, volunteering, serving, I'm working, I'm riding my bike a ton, I work on my bike, and then I also worked at another company called Bye Baby, just kind of ends meet, making the ends meet, earning money, supporting myself, going to church regular, being a member of my church. My brother calls me up in August of 2018, and my brother and his family live out in Washington presently. They live outside of the city of Tacoma. And my brother calls me up and he says, Clark, hey, man, Nicole, his wife, and I are kind of going through a job change. Would you come out and watch Cassie and Petra for us while we kind of transition this summer into me staying at home and her going back to work as a full-time teacher? And so I said yes, and I loved that opportunity, and I jumped on it, and I lived in Washington for a little less than a year. In 2018, lived in Washington State in the city of Puyallup, and I got to be, I called it a Manny, and I watched my two nieces every day for about 3 months from September through December, and then I spent the next 5 months feeling like I was flailing like a fish out of water, just living in the town. But I was super plugged into my church, and that's what really mattered, was that I was with my church, and I was playing on the worship team, and I was leading our youth groups, the middle school kids, and even the high school kids. I got to participate in Bible studies as much as I could possibly do it, as much as I could possibly get with my friends who I went to church with there. We would get together over the word, and we would just drive around and just bump music and just live and do things and engage with the word and engage with people. And I really got involved. One of the strongest points about that point of time when I'm in Washington is that I really got involved with a homeless ministry out there. It was a day shelter, and it's called New Hope. They would close their doors around 5 p.m., but from around 6 or 7 a.m., people can show up and they go there for a place of refuge and safety where they don't have it otherwise. And that was a really cool thing for me, where that would get me off the couch. That would get me excited to just get out into the world, where I wasn't really needed. I had finished my kind of time with helping my brother and his wife, but I didn't really know where I was going, and they were being really generous and letting me figure that out. And it was in that time I got to really volunteer and serve. So there's still some conflict into that point of what am I really doing? But I had a lot of great things to do all the while. This is around 2018 to 19. I'm living in Washington, serving actively with my church, serving actively with ministries in the town there in Puyallup, Washington. And then in 2019, I moved back to Franklin, and I lived with my dad for about a year. And it's around this time I've been trying to join the military. I'm trying to join the Army, I'm trying to join the Navy, I'm trying to join the Air Force, and they won't take me. I try really persistently. And my criminal record really was held against me. Maybe I can draw some bars here. Here's a window, here's our jail window with some bricks. And so I never actually was never in a jail like that, but there was something that was stopping me from being able to go do this thing that I thought I wanted to do, which was join the military and go serve. And then suddenly, my walk with Christ, there just came a great reminder of being a servant and what does it mean to serve. And so I'm living back in Franklin with my dad, and I go from realizing I'm not going to be able to actually join the military, and that's kind of a fruitless search for me, to just feeling like the Lord speaks into my mind and brings the word of check out international missions. Yeah. So the first step that led me to that, however, was that I went from the military to starting to think about the Peace Corps. And so I'm filling out an application to the Peace Corps, and the Lord redirects me really quickly and says, hey, before you do this, what does it actually mean to serve? And immediately, just like a shock, a jolt, I was like, well, what about missions? And so I just start looking up different missionary organizations. There's the IMB, and there's a cool another Baptist organization. I think they're called the ABE or ABW or something like that. I still have their email list. I'm on their email list every once in a while. And I just started to explore those. And I called back my pastor from out here in Washington, where I'm serving a lot, helping out with the church there, and they're called Joy of Life Church. They've since changed their name, but Joy of Life was such a really great name that I think that's the one to remember here, and that's the name of the church at the time that I was there in Washington, Joy of Life. And Pastor Wade, he directs me to the church website, so I'm online, sitting on my laptop, and he says, hey man, just check out Open Bible Churches, and I want you to find this email from this organization called School of Global Leadership with Open Bible Churches. I want you to send them an email. And I did that. And Pastor Wade and his wife Pam get in contact with me. And as the world is kind of experiencing some tumultuousness and the global virus, which is ongoing, as is many other illnesses, but we know that's not where our hope lies. And I would never encourage someone to put their hope into something that's actually trying to kill them, such as a virus. But to lead us back to what I think the eternal answer is there. The eternal life is leading us to. And that was to a point for me in that moment, thankfully, of mission and serving and being patient for the time of when that might actually happen. And so I end up going fast forward where I have to wait a whole year, thinking I'm going to go to Trinidad, but the borders are closed. My pastors are actually displaced. They haven't been back home. They just went back to Trinidad for the first time this past month in October, as they were gearing up, and I'm sure a few of you know about my opportunity to go to Kenya. So that's with these pastors from my connection at Joy of Life Church. So the Lombards, they are the pastors of the church in Trinidad, not Joy of Life, but of Trinidad. And they're currently in Kenya. I got to go to Tijuana in 2021 in this year, where I waited from 2020 to 2021 to actually find a service opportunity with my pastors, where we're in contact the whole time and doing some discipleship and Zoom calls, and doing this whole weird abstract idea of like living digitally with people. Got to read a bunch of cool books, and I would love to talk about that more. But so I finally get to go to Tijuana in 2021, where I have made plans to go to Tijuana. I've been getting ready to do that, leading up through the year of 2021, 2020, and I move out of my friend's house here in Nashville, where I'm living at the time, as I was living with Franklin at the time. I move up to Nashville because my dad kicks me out, and gently maybe, and I go to Tijuana, move out of Nashville, move out of all that stuff. My dad does still help me. He puts my stuff up in one of his bedrooms there in his condo, and I get to store my stuff there. Where I go to Tijuana, and I return from Tijuana here in July this past summer, and I'm really kind of not sure of where I'm going next, but the Lord puts me in contact with Joey, where Joey had actually been in contact with me in a couple of years previous, and he's in their family obviously being in contact and having a great connection there with Joey and the Langfords. Joey invites me to come out to the farm, and this is in July of this summer, where I actually got to meet Camille and Sterling, you guys being here, and I go into the packing room in July of this summer, and I just get to see a little glimpse of like what's happening here on the farm, where I've heard about Cul2vate. I know Joey's written a book, and it's called Fulfilled. I know that he's doing great things, and he was in South Africa, and he got to raise his family there on mission, where this idea of coming off of mission, even though it was only a month long. I was only in Mexico for a month, but I just got this great glimpse and this view, the taste and see moment, as we're kind of called to in Scripture. Taste and see that the Lord is good. And Joey's invitation to come up, check out the farm, leads to me working at Cul2vate, where he invites me to come back. I'm really glad Joey's getting better, because it was actually the first day that I was going to start working. I got sick, and I just felt like some kind of weird full circle moment, where the season's kind of full along of being in Cul2vate, and I just find those little moments of where, well, man, I hope everybody's staying healthy, and for Joey to recover as he's recovering and feeling better. But I got really sick that I wasn't even able to show up my first day. I had gotten sick, but then I started to be able to come, and I see this great opportunity, and I'm now here at Cul2vate, and that's started for me here this past August, where I got to kind of start fresh with the incoming class. So I'm really excited for wherever I will be going into the future, but I'm at a point now where A commitment to Christ not only identifies me, but that's the point that I actively try to seek to share, to express every word and every breath that I can. And I think that comes down to even his name as well. So I'm going to put Cul2vate on the board here now. And this would be the end or the close of my story. I know there's so much more, but to come to a close. And thanks, guys, for your time.